Good morning, everyone. This is Alpna Doshi. I'm board director and founder of Stralynn Consulting Services and ex-CIO of Royal Philips and Reliance Group and a few other companies. I've had the great opportunity to work in various continents, and I'm delighted to be a host to this extremely high-powered panel on the topic of data-powered digital transformation. With me, I have our esteemed panelists, Jim Jose from QAD. Uh, Jim has been with QAD since 2001 and now leads the whole information technology services organization. He has over 25 plus years of enterprise application development and implementation experiences. And it's a pleasure to hear from him on this panel, important insights and important learnings as well as coaching. Also, welcome, Jim. Also with us is Suchita Nagale from Scintillis Performance Solutions. She is the CIO of Scintillis, and her responsibilities include business applications, infrastructure, data and governance, and security. She has over 20 plus years experience in developing IT strategies across the board, and I'll probably leave it in during the discussion for her to highlight many such examples and situations she has been through. Suchita, welcome on board to the panel.
Thanks, Alpna.
Umesh Tuprani is here with us. Umesh heads the whole cloud operations, a very hot topic in the entire industry. He is from Barracuda Networks and has a real mission to transform to software as a service. With 30 years of experience, Umesh is helping companies scale to various limits. I bet, Umesh, there is no limit to how much you can scale in the SaaS environment. It's a pleasure to have you and hear your perspectives as well during the discussion.
Thank you for inviting me.
Uh, as you can see, all these companies are portfolio companies, interestingly, from private equity backgrounds, representing Thoma Bravo or transition from Thoma Bravo to KKR and others. And the recent trends in private equity has really been very, very promising. There is strong fundraising. It seems to be very set to continue. There is always finding a place to put dry powder to work. ESG is going to the next level, and the adoption of disruptive technologies to filter into private equity, that's the name of the game. And with more private equities, coming towards the technology disruptions, absolutely the chief information digital officers, that's the kind of involvement, the roles, the evolutions that we are constantly seeing is in demand. And during our panel, we will see a lot of interesting topics covering from governance. How do you make sure the challenges are covered? When you say a data powered digital transformation is done, how do you make sure that there is an evolving role between the CIOs and CDOs and effectively CIDO? So many such questions and new topics will be discussed during this session. From Stralynn's standpoint, I can tell you we are a breath of fresh air. Myself and my co-founder, Archana Jain, we having worked in the industry for as close to 3 decades, we have seen a lot of the disruptions happening from the legacy to what's next gen. And we are here to make sure we do the right transformation in the right time and with the right budgets. So with that, I'd like to share with our live audience that there is an opportunity to put in your questions in the chat mailbox, and we will make sure that either during the session or post the session, when we make the recordings available, we will try and address as many of your questions or will send you responses one-on-one. So are we ready to go? All right. So first, let me take this opportunity to ask Suchita, from your perspective, the digital transformation, that word obviously means a lot of things to a lot of people. And even now, what I find is it's not clear all the time what does transformation really entail. Could you share your insights on how do you define digital transformation?
Alpana, and I have kind of an interesting background. I've worked for the software companies in the software industry for a number of years. And then I've also worked for a not-for-profit for around 3 years as well, where I've led their digital transformation initiatives. And the digital transformation meant different things in the in the settings that I was involved with. So what I would say is, in my mind, what the commonality between the digital transformation initiatives across these different companies were, is that you're looking at business process engineering or re-engineering, so optimization of business processes, leveraging technology, and aligning that with the goals of your organization from a growth perspective. So really looking to grow your organization as you leverage the technology and then internally re-engineer the business processes. So as you know, Alp, and I know you were pretty close with us in our journey at Syntellis, where we ended up really taking all of our business applications and transforming the way that we were utilizing those applications, bringing in new applications, but it was all within the context of business processes. So really understanding what we were looking to do from an efficiency perspective across the organization, and then the growth standpoint as our organization looked to grow, leveraging the technologies. On the not-profit side, it was purely a growth play for us, because when we were working, I was working for HFMA, which is a Healthcare Financial Management Association. And within that construct, what the work that we did was really to grow our membership organization. So the membership organization was on a declining trend. We needed to really ramp up our digital presence in order to increase revenues and really, make that association far more relevant as we looked ahead. So that was really from the construct of revenue growth as we looked at the transformation. But in both of those situations, leveraging business processes in the most efficient manner, and then the underlying technology and optimizing that was where the focal point was.
Interesting. And would you say, I mean, from your perspective, Umesh, uh, do you have the same definition that we hear from Suchita, or you hear different aspects that you are highlighting? I mean, I am seeing definitely revenue growth, operational efficiency is as key drivers towards this transformation. Would love to hear your perspectives.
No, I'm 100% in agreement with Suchita here. There's too many companies that I hear about that think of digital transformation as a strategy. Digital transformation by itself is not a strategy. It is the means to achieve your business goals, and digitizing your framework, your workflows, etc., in some meaningful way to benefit the business is what it's all about, as very clearly as Suchita has articulated. So very similar path is what we are following here at Barracuda, is moving our legacy businesses to what I would call SaaSify, again, primarily for, I would say, scale, flexibility, and agility. I mean, the world is moving to the cloud. They need things done at real time, very quickly. And if we don't keep pace, we can't keep up. The businesses are not going to survive. So the digital transformation to us is a methodology to get to where we want to go as a business.
Absolutely. Yeah, business is not going to survive. It's a mandatory thing. And taking that point further, digital transformation always takes a toll on the time frame, you take up from your regular operations roles, keeping lights on. And I'd be interested to hear, Jim, from your perspective. I know you are running an exciting transformation as we speak. When do you really see that a transformation is done? What's the definition of done, right?
When the business achieves its goals, that to me is when you know it's done. I think all too often, and prior to QAD being acquired by Thoma Bravo, I think our company was focused on tools and thinking that, oh, if you implement the right tool, it will meet your objectives. It's really, as Sucheta described, a three-legged stool. It's about business processes, it's about efficiency, it's about your technology. And all three of those together really need to come together in alignment to achieve your objectives. And then to be able to measure the results once you finish your implementation or finish your rollout is where you can really tell if you've made that successful digital transformation. But I think all too often companies focus on one side of the equation or the other. Like if I have the best tool, then I can have the results. No, it's all has to work in alignment. Your tools, your processes, your efficiency, they all gotta be in alignment.
And Alpana, if I can just add to Jim's point, like I totally agree with you, Jim. I mean, I think having the measurable objectives to then really assess whether you're done or not, because all too often, in IT projects as we know it, it's never done because there's always kind of that next iteration of enhancements, improvements that are coming. The business priorities are shifting. There's dynamic aspects of the business that are happening. So really making sure that we have the clear goals and objectives and that are measurable makes a huge difference. So totally agree with Jim that without that, there really can be no definition, of done.
And what I find is, say, the revenue, the financial metrics, many a time are easier to be seen, if a company has met its growth objectives or customer satisfaction scores. Now, in the case of transformation, would you share thoughts on what kind of qualitative metrics in your respective roles you really need to stay awake on? Are there things that um, the whole organization needs to know very well? I am awake because of these particular metrics. And as part of the transformation journey that we are in, we really need to meet these. So would love to hear from any one of you, your thoughts on that. What keeps you awake?
So I can chime in. I mean, for us, it's really customer satisfaction is the number one, I think, pulse check in terms of whether we're really hitting the mark with the software that we're delivering, the utilization or the experience with that software. And as you talk about the quantitative versus qualitative, Alpna, I mean, that really hits home because for us, we did a lot of quantitative measures. I'm sure everybody, Jim, I know you guys are in the same situation, Umesh, you as well. Just as we look at measurability on CSAT, typically we get these scores, right? NPS ratings, you have scores associated with that. But they do tend to miss things when you don't look at the qualitative aspect of it because you may only have certain customers responding. So for us, for a very long time, we were thinking, we were doing a great job based on our ratings. And I think for the most part, that was true. But we were missing some fundamental key drivers that only came out of qualitative feedback where we interviewed that client base and we understood at more deeper levels what was the sentiment that was going on there. So I think, just really pairing up that quantitative feedback with qualitative for us doing that at the customer satisfaction level made a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And, focusing on measurables like uptime and other key areas like that all go towards customer satisfaction. So being able to measure that and show those things are very important as well.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add to what I just heard was the qualitative aspects we tend to repeat every month, every 2 months, regularly to get continuous feedback from our customers, because that's the yardstick by which everybody goes by, which is how satisfied and how happy are our customers in deploying our products. And some of it, yeah, is measured in CSAT, but CSAT tends to take the form of when there's a customer issue and you do a good job, you get a good CSAT score. And if there's an issue and you tend to take a longer time trying to resolve something, those numbers tend to go down. We shouldn't be waiting for a customer issue to happen to determine whether we're meeting the needs of our customers. So that qualitative feedback loop that Suchita was referring to is very important for us to continue to do, so that we get that feedback in real time on a regular basis for us to do our course corrections, if you will.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, so from what I hear from all of you is that, at the end of the day, it is not necessarily just a tools or an IT initiative. I mean, absolutely, it is a business and an end customer initiative that proves the success. Now, thinking about data, and many of the transformations that have gone through have actually looked at data at the tail end. When you have a user acceptance test going or a go live about to happen, the whole organization, if you picturize that, is about to see a huge change. How do you put in an order? How do you do invoicing, billing, etc.? And then there comes in this data of a major account which is just not mapping, and the salespeople are struggling. I'd love to hear some great stories and horror stories. Maybe we'll start with you, Jim. What has been your experience, or has it been a rosy ground so far? Lucky for you, then.
I'm trying to think of some horror stories. None come to mind right now. So I feel like I'm letting you down. But no, I'm sorry. I don't have anything that comes to mind right now.
That's fine, and it's not letting me down. I'm happy to hear. I'm sure I'll ask Umesh and Sucheta the same question. If you have any of these stories to share, and it can be very good experience as well, by the way, need not be always a horror story.
I can chime in. We had a situation where we have a backup product and we have an archiving product as well. And each of these is in a different path to the cloud. We have completed the backup piece, the archiving piece is in process. And when we looked at the archiving piece and we said, okay, this is what we need to do, there was folks wanting to jump in and start doing the transformation because we know how to do this. We've done this for a slew of products earlier. Everybody said, hey, we know how to do this. We can roll up our sleeves and jump in. The trick was to take a step back and figure out how to do this efficiently, because the answer to moving something is it's not a one size fits all. You have to look at what the application does, what the application is, what changes it needs. I know I'm preaching to the choir on some of these things, but it's very important to take that step back. And what we found, for example, was there was a good 35% data that was common between our backup and our archiving solutions. We would have, had we just jumped in head first into the pool, we would have duplicated. And when we say 30%, we're talking at a scale of 100 to 250, 200 petabytes. That's a lot of data that we would have had to duplicate and move unnecessarily because we didn't take that step back. So looking at holistically at what data you have, what needs to get done, becomes a very important first step so that you can then plan the transition appropriately. I don't know if that answered your question, but it was something that we were scratching our heads while we were going through this and saying, thank God we didn't jump into this head first, because we would have wasted 2-3 months just moving the data.
And that's exactly the point of my question, on the data side. And maybe Suchita, you can add your insights as well. Umesh mentioned about it being the first step. How do you relate it in your experience? And maybe, yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, I think if you don't look at your data as the first step, I mean, you're bound to just have problems downstream. So our example was also kind of similar, well, similar meaning in context to Umesh's. When we did at Syntellis, we had a double carve-out situation, as you know, Alpana, right? So we were acquired by Thoma Bravo, but then also the company that we spun off from had carried out another acquisition prior to with the sell-off to Thoma Bravo. So with this double carve-out, it was really two large companies coming together. And then within that, there were several smaller companies over time that had been rolled up into the organization. So as we did our digital transformation initiative, one of the fundamental questions for us was, what is the resulting product structure going to look like? So the SKU structure that's going to support our quote to cash workflow, what will that look like? And had we gone down the path of just simply pulling in the data from these various systems and aggregating it, we would have ended up with 5,000 plus SKUs. And a lot of those were duplicates. There were legacy, cleanup that had not been done within those SKU structures. So we actually took the effort to rationalize the SKUs up front. And as a result of that, we ended up, it was less than 500 that we ended up with from a SKU perspective relative to where we would have been. And doing that resulted in downstream simplicity and efficiencies in that quote to cash process, which otherwise would have just been horrendous. So if we hadn't had that initial upfront focus on data, I think we would have been in real trouble at the back end. And that was just one example. Others would be accounts, as you look at customer data coming in and prospects and leads, you have the similar challenges that we were facing. So we did a significant amount of rationalization across all the different data sources that we're getting in, simply to support that more simpler experience downstream.
Right. Yeah, I have always seen, to highlight your point, that a business, there are some business cleanups that are necessary before you embark into the journey of actual technology or business process transformation. So like the SKUs, in our experiences as well, we have seen 5,000 and in some companies, 20,000 plus SKUs that really need to be transformed. And the main purpose is you're taking up a CRM. You might have like a CRM and an ERP, which is probably, multiple such instances from multiple acquisitions, right? And then you're trying to consolidate it. I'm not sure if Jim, I know you are seeming to acknowledge that. What's your experience there?
Well, you have to clean out the garage every once in a while. So in our own CRM implementation, we had hundreds and hundreds of thousands of contacts, for example, hadn't been touched for years. I mean, you just have to get rid of that data. It's no longer valuable. It's no longer actionable, and it becomes noise. And it's almost noise to the point of distraction. So going through that rationalization, cleaning out your garage, hugely important with any of these large scale digital transformations. You have to take the time. It's very time consuming. It requires focus and effort and expertise to look at that, but it pays huge dividends to like I said, clean out your garage, organize yourself, get rid of that noise, and you become just more efficient moving forward.
Well said. Cleaning up the garage. It's the summertime. Let's clean all that up. It helps because when you're migrating, then it's a lot smaller, relatively smaller problem to then look into. This is taking us into some newer trajectory, and it would be insane not to cover the latest technology, which probably are already quite proven by now. Are you seeing, you all are all working in extremely high growth, SaaS oriented or transforming to SaaS oriented environments? Are you seeing an embrace of, say, artificial intelligence in the data modeling or any application of artificial intelligence in the whole digital transformation process? And AI is one example. There could be robotics process automation, or there could be blockchain or anything else that you are seeing, or is the trend still needed to be picked up holistically, and the whole transformations are going through, despite the large volumes of data, are still going through the regular standard process of trying to do it through scripting and then trying to implement it. What's the process you all are following, each one of you, the same question, in this transformation journey?
For me, it's a growing area for sure. There's a lot of startup companies these days that are looking at your process data and trying to find ways, patterns to improve your efficiency. A lot of ERP systems are looking to get into this space. We as an ERP company are actually looking at some companies that provide this intelligence, a way to improve your processes by looking holistically at your processes, making sure that processes are being followed that are required, uh, the timing of those processes, if they're late, if they're on time, etc. So we're seeing a lot of growth in this area, and there's, like I said, a lot of startup companies that are introducing some really interesting ways to look at your processes, to measure them, and to feed back that information in real time so that you can make adjustments. So my experience so far with AI and this has been not super valuable, but I think it is decidedly an area that is maturing and getting better at providing value, especially in real time. So it's definitely an area that you need to take a look at.
Excellent. Any thoughts from Umesh or Suchita?
For us, yeah, I will be liar if I said we figured this out. No, we haven't. We have a combination of manual work and some automation to and work is in progress. To Jim's point, uh, we started with what I believe everything should start with, which is what is the end business goal that you have in mind, and that's what we would like to deliver. And in our situation, uh, what we found was we have a lot of data which is disparate because we have this product group getting their own data sets, working with them independently. I have a different business unit with their own data set that is working independently. And what we're finding is there is a fair overlap of customers, information, data that is not being shared as effectively as it should. And so we're trying to figure out what is the best way to collectively provide some intelligence on a specific customer, for example, in terms of what their buying patterns are, how big they are, what their trending is, et cetera, et cetera. So we're in that journey right now. So is AI applicable? Probably, don't know. We're looking at it. And is there other technologies they can leverage and use? Probably, don't know. So not the answer you wanted to hear, but this is a journey in progress.
Absolutely. Yeah. Suchita, you're
Yeah,
trying to
sure.
put
So
your, yeah.
I'll add a bit more to that. So with Syntellis, I mean, we have AI. It's twofold for us. One is our own products are in the data space, so we're looking at how we can embed artificial intelligence within our own engine as it relates to the software that we're developing. And there we're making really good progress. I mean, we have data scientists on board. Some of the technologies that we're looking at have natively that capability. So it's being embedded within our product vehicle. On the internal corporate IT side, it definitely is slower from an adoption standpoint. So I totally agree with Jim and Umesh. I mean, it's not as though you want to just have AI for the sake of AI. You have to look at use cases where it's applicable and there's real value behind it, and then based on that look at implementing. So some areas that we have been leveraging, and the way that we're approaching it really is for the vendors that we're utilizing, so the SaaS vendors we're bringing in, we pay special attention to their AI capabilities because we realize that initially it may not be something where we need to go, but longer term definitely is a play that we want to be at. So we want them to be on the leading edge in terms of the AI use cases that they're going to support. So as an example, we are in the process of implementing a knowledge base for our support organization using knowledge-centered support and really trying to be at the forefront of where the technology is headed there. And artificial intelligence is a huge play there, AI and machine learning, because understanding, customers as they're self-serving, what is going to be applicable and learning from the result sets that get presented to them will make a huge value add for us as we look at that. So that's an area that we're really going to be looking at leveraging the AI ML capability. The other one that we have found value in is our security products. So security products that we are implementing, the vendors that we've looked at, we have specifically, really evaluated their capabilities around the machine learning and AI because our own internal security organization is pretty limited. I mean, we have resource constraints, as I'm sure everybody on this call will agree. The IT doesn't have an endless budget. It's pretty, it's very limited. So based on that, we're trying to make sure that there are efficiencies in any of the solutions that we're deploying, and security being so many of these tools. And now we're in a world where cyber attacks are, ongoing pretty regularly. Being in front of that and just making sure that we're really using the latest and greatest technology capability associated with that makes a huge difference. So I think ML AI plays a big part in that area too.
Yeah, I want to add to what Sucheta said. In the security area, in our SIM endpoint detection, AI has really played a very valuable role in identifying threats. So had some very good success in that area for sure.
Oh, super. You're taking me exactly to the area I want to discuss next. First of all, just on the automation and the views that you all shared consistently, I would say is, there is a significant amount of automation that can help. Now, what technology you use to automate it is totally dependent on whichever is most efficient, whether it is AI, RPA, or anything else, right? At the end of the day, it's the business goal that you're really trying to achieve. So technology, not for the sake of technology, but really for the end result. I did want to mention that, there is something which is this whole term of lead to cash transformation, the end to end, right? The business process transformation that we go through. And with zero code type of things that are coming up extremely fast, that's one of the things that our team is working on, where you could, instead of having the 40-member team come from a partner and use like another 15, 20 people from internal to your respective companies, we could make it a lot more agile in terms of number of resources needed through this zero code lead to cash automation. We'll have more to share about it in our subsequent sessions, but I just thought it was pertinent to our discussion here. Talking of cybersecurity, now from a digital transformation journey, I mean, do you still see cybersecurity as an add-on where there is a separate cybersecurity team, and it can be part of IT, it can be part of the corporate governance, but do you see how you can be more inclusive of cybersecurity in the whole data-powered transformation journey that you are going through? Or is it the audit committee coming in, and then when there is an issue, hey, this code did not get properly done, and hence there is this security breach, or there is some other endpoint breach. So I do want to hear what your thoughts are on how cybersecurity gets included fully, partially, or not at all during the time that business and IT are going through the transformation journey.
Oh, I'll jump in there. It needs to be fully embedded. Cybersecurity is it's so incredibly critically important to an organization. It has to weave through your organization. It has to be part of your DNA. If it's not, you're going to get breached. It's going to be a problem. We've had hard lessons here at QAD, and because of that, I think it was a blessing in disguise. We've had those hard lessons, and we've had to make cybersecurity incorporated in just about everything we do. And like I said, it just has to be part of your DNA as an organization. And if you're not, it's not. You're going to experience troubles sooner rather than later. So again, to reiterate, has to be part of your DNA, has to be fully embedded.
And Umesh, I know you're a cybersecurity, firm tycoon in that. And how do you look at that question or solution?
Oh, I have ulterior motives here. When I came in, we had not, I would say, not very well-defined criteria spread across. Given that Barracuda grew a lot through acquisitions, there was different aspects of what cybersecurity to one particular team meant something completely different from another team. So I used this transformation as a way to standardize across a whole bunch of different functions. So again, to echo Jim's point, it becomes, as you take that first step back when you decide what you want to do, cybersecurity has to be embedded across the entire fabric of this of any transformation at every stage, whether it's in the engineering product to make sure that you've got the 100% code coverage, to making sure you're deploying all the right tools to ensure there are no gaps there, to looking at the infrastructure, to looking at the pipes, to looking at just the end to end to make sure that you're covered. And at the end of it all, you have the right access controls in place, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it becomes, as you said, embedded in the entire fabric of the transformation. You can't do it otherwise.
Very well said. And maybe one very interesting question that Suchita was alluding to and expressing her remarks on budgeting. What do you think? Is there enough budget being allocated in the transformation programs, both on data as well as cybersecurity, which in my own experiences, I have honestly seen that these two areas are probably critical three-legged tools, like you were mentioning earlier, Jim and Suchita, but they are still not given as much priority in the whole allocation process. What would be your thoughts on this interesting topic of budget and harnessing it for the right reasons so that the end goals are better achieved than being penny wise foolish, obviously, right?
Yeah, so I can start with that. So from what I've seen, which has been really interesting, and I agree with you, I think data is one where, because it's behind the scenes and it's not as prevalent and front facing, that it's harder to really get the funding and the budgeting on data, data governance, any of the initiatives that are requiring kind of the outside third party assistance or tools that we need to implement on that. However, I think we are in the process of educating our own business in terms of the ramifications of what does happen. And they've seen some of these instances where if we're not investing in these solutions up front, like what can be the downstream impact and the cost can be far greater than if we had gone in and, right, I think is the point that you're making, Alpna, if we'd gone in and implemented it the right way. So that I think has been a harder sell, at least for us, is on the data side. But what I've noticed is the cybersecurity, and because of the publicity from the cyber attacks and everything that's going on that we're seeing in the industry, at Syntellis, I mean, it is our number one, or very close to our number one focus. So when we have product solutions that we're asking for that help really secure that framework, like we're not getting a lot of resistance on the cybersecurity side. I think the investments are easier for us to make and show, because of the value proposition behind that. At least that's what we're finding. And just adding on to where cybersecurity is playing in, I mean, I'm total agreement with Umesh and Jim on that. Like it's been more and more moved to the left-hand side where it's really embedded as part of our development cycle. So we're very early on in the process, giving thought and understanding on what are the security measures that are needed has become, pretty instrumental and part of the DNA for the organization. So budget-wise, I think security is an easier investment to ask versus data for us, at least we've seen, is a little bit more difficult.
I would add that private equity and firms like Thoma Bravo see the value in data and they're willing to invest in it. So not only security, like you said, Sucheta, security is almost an easy ask. Like if you need to be secure, but Thoma Bravo in particular, and I think all private equity firms are driven by data decisions. So they see the value in investing in data and data governance and making sure that you're getting quality output. So we talked early on in this session about measuring, and it all goes back to measuring. And you can't measure without good data. You can't measure without good data infrastructure, good data governance. So I think at least
I think we lost Jim's audio for a minute
Okay.
there.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, he's back. Okay, no, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, please complete your thought.
No, I had finished there. So
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, data decision making, absolutely. I do notice in most private equity owned portfolio companies, I mean, this is the whole from X to 10X, you need real good data. That's the mission there. And therefore, that is a priority and a completely see the cybersecurity, it's a business case in itself. Let's not be sorry after the fact. And it's a must that we must do. I'm going to switch gears to one very, very interesting topic, which I believe our audience and all of you are interested in talking about. That is related to chief information officers, chief digital officers, chief data officers, heads of ITs, in this whole domain, the role that each one of you are playing, right? And the merger of these roles. In many companies, there are the digital roles that are put as an overarching role, and then the IT becomes more like a responsible unit to the digital transformation roles. How do you see the merger of CIOs and CDOs and IT heads into a common role, which is the CIDO role? I'd love to hear every one of you talk through that. This is you all are thought leaders in your own regard, and the industry needs the kind of insights that you would have. Maybe Jim, you can go first in light of some of the obligations you have coming up next.
right. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting merger that's happening, but I think it's an important merger. These things, your data governance, digital transformation, they're all just so critical to the organization to help make those decisions, to measure and run your organization. So to me, it's a necessary merger of those roles, and it's bringing focus to the organization for that. So that's how I see it, and I think it's a good thing.
Excellent. How about Umesh and Suchita?
You're on mute, Sucheta.
Suchita, you're on mute. Yeah.
You can go. I have my dog barking currently.
Oh, okay. No,
As an opinion.
for me, to me, I always hesitate when it comes to looking at these titles, because it somehow implies that this person is the one responsible for, say, for example, Chief Information Security Officer. This person is responsible for security for the company. And as such, if anything happens, their heads is going to be chopped or whatever it is. And in reality, this is not an individual challenge. This is a company challenge. So when you say there is somebody the chief digital officer or chief data officer, it is very difficult for that person individually to affect change. So from a title perspective, knock yourself out if you want to use the titles. But to me, what I would call the information role, managing information is what it's all about. And the key word there is information, not data. Data is not going to tell you anything. It is going to be extracting what you need from that data. That's what I call information. And it's information role is what I consider as critical for the company. Is like, how do we make sure that as a company, we're extracting the right information from the data sets that we have access to, and in the right way, and making sure that our customers are protected along the way. So as an amalgamation, a single title that encompasses all this makes a lot more sense to me, as opposed to anointing somebody as a chief security officer and a chief data officer and chief, they've got a what, digital officer, and what the heck does that mean? You know, what are you going to do as a chief digital officer? It's like chief strategy officer. To me, I'm sorry, it doesn't mean anything, because you can't have an individual responsible for something like that. It's just doesn't make sense to me. Sorry.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Umesh. I think the isolation of the chief data officer function just doesn't make a lot of sense to me either. I mean, because it's so dependent on everything else and all other aspects from an IT or technology perspective that you're doing. Merging those functions together is, is really where I would see the most value. Now, underneath that, you may have someone focus on data and really kind of help us drive that organization forward, just as similarly as we have a security officer function within IT. But having it all kind of under the same functional umbrella, where there are so many dependencies between these functions, makes a lot more sense than having individual kind of focus on that. And what we're also seeing from our end is that data function extends to the external, customer segment as well, because of our own products and how we're developing it. And there is so much, again, interaction and dependency between data, all other aspects of IT and security, that we found a lot of value having these functions under one central unit.
I really synergize with both of you on the energy and the emotions around this topic. Having lived through multiple lives in transformations, I would say the siloed approach of a data officer, a digital officer, an IT officer, or a CIO, it just makes the solutioning of things so much more difficult. And when a particular person in that role approaches the management for that kind of a title, it's not necessarily always for the glamour of the title, but really because of the actionability of the content, the information, as Umesh, you also put it. It's really getting the job done in the right way. And you do need to be empowered with that responsibility. And for good or bad, many a times, titles do declare to the rest of the organization that, hey, you're empowered to make those decisions and to drive those decisions, right? So I'm in full support and, bang on in terms of this particular discussion. Really enjoyed your insights there. I'd like to now, there are some questions from the audience that I would like to, if you're ready, I'd like to take up with you in this last few minutes of our conversation here. One of the questions is, today the industry is talking about data driving your future processes. What innovation would be required to fuel this industry forward to the next gen? What do you see as the next gen?
Alpana, I think it's really making that even outside of just innovation. I think we've got innovation is, to me, probably a few steps, few steps forward. The immediate kind of next step from a data perspective is similar to where we're seeing security becoming the DNA, a part of the company. We really need to have data do the same, where the decisions that we're making are data driven, right? I think we see that in certain instances of the organization, and it's starting to get better in terms of how individuals are focused on that. But making data driven decisions as part of the DNA of the company, using, even leveraging the existing technology stacks that are there, is probably the number one, step that as organizations and us as IT leaders need to embrace and push forward. And then beyond that, I would say the innovation is really leveraging machine learning, AI within that data, the data stack. So looking at technologies that will help us be more efficient in making those decisions and more proactive, right? Because I think what's happening, at least in our world, is we do a lot of reactive decision making, where we're looking at that, data backwards and saying, oh yeah, the last 6 months showed this, so let's go ahead and improve that. Wouldn't it be great to look at it more proactively, where we're not being told something and then reacting from that, but really just understanding behaviors and recommendations coming out of those behaviors, using artificial intelligence and machine learning to drive our path forward. So I think that to me, it's like a two-step approach. One is, let's just leverage data and make sure we're all utilizing that. And then second step would be to embed that with machine learning and AI.
Well said. Well said. Let me take up the next question, risk. And it's an important topic. Risk mitigation is an important criterion when planning a digital transformation. What are some of the top risks to consider and mitigate? Umesh, did you want to take a shot at that?
Sure. For us, when we start thinking about the number one risk is obviously we are, again, dealing from the business we're in, we're dealing with customer data. And so that is the first thing we put on the table, is how do we make sure we have the right data and security practices in place to ensure that any transformation is not going to compromise that data. That's number one. And number two, how do we also ensure that this data is always going to be accessible to the customer as and when they need it, as and when they want it, as and when they demand it? So to ensure that we are providing that level of availability is also something of a factor that we consider, because you could end up spending a lot of money for a lot of solutions, which may be somewhat overkill. So it's the idea is to balance the funding with and assume a certain amount of risk, but make sure that there is no compromise to the customer data, if you will. So that is really front and center. Is for us, we are so maniacally focused on making sure we're providing a safe haven for our customer data. That becomes pretty much the overarching thought process in any migration that we undertake.
Understood.
And I can just add, sorry, Alpha, I can add a little bit to that. I mean, I think one of the key risks in a digital transformation initiative is not having an understanding of your end goal that's measurable, right? So measurable, clean objectives at the end that you're going toward, because more often than not, we tend to get into the minutia of the detail and really just looking at optimizing and perfection associated with these initiatives, that we sometimes forget to just take a step back and look at what was the end result that we were looking for, and making sure that we have an eye on that throughout the process. So we're not, really derailing from the exercise to try and do something that isn't adding value to that end objective that we have. So that to me has a lot of risk, because that impacts your timelines, your budget, all the pieces around that. So just clear eye toward the goal is helpful from a mitigation perspective.
No, totally. And I'd just further add that change management in all of these, because the end of the day, all the points that you have highlighted as the key risks, you have to make sure that the organization does go through that whole change management process. So when you do go live, then people know how to use the process as well. And you don't want to create a situation of panic. And we would have time for only one more question, and I'll share that with you. We run into issues with respect to business and IT, and we are, I guess, relating to the same situation of silos. How do you demarcate the responsibilities of a business person? And should business be in the lead, or should IT be in the lead to drive these transformations? Who is the sponsor at the end of the day?
So what I think we have seen successful is really a partnership between the two, and working together throughout the journey to really make that the most effective. And IT, I mean, from an IT perspective, not understanding the business, I think, is the biggest pitfall that you can fall into. So making sure that you're approaching the IT side with a strong business context, business process, makes a huge difference to gain your credibility with the business, but also really the effectiveness of the overall initiative. But viewing it as more of a partnership and leading it from that perspective makes the initiative much more successful than it otherwise will be.
I echo that. We follow a very standard RACI model on that, where the technical team is responsible for the implementation, but we, to Suchita's point, you can never take your eye off the final goal that you want to achieve, and that is the role of the business persons to ensure that we are going to indeed achieve that particular goal. So they are actively invested as a partnership in making sure we are delivering to that goal. And obviously, like everything else, goals may shift, which is not uncommon. How many times have we talked to customers who just told us, oh, okay, now I don't want this, I want something else. This is very similar. So that makes sure that then as a partnership, then you stay aligned. That becomes very important.
Sure, absolutely. With that, maybe I'll request you to just say quick last comments from each one of you. Suchita, that you want to share with the audience, please.
No, I mean, I think this has been I've really enjoyed this discussion, and getting the perspectives from Umesh and Jim on their respective organizations and how they're seeing the roadmap from an IT standpoint as we look forward. And look, I mean, we all live in a challenging environment. IT is not, as we know it, an easy endeavor to really lead and pursue. But having kind of having and seeing a lot of the energy around the initiatives like cybersecurity, data transformation, and digital transformation makes it really exciting to be a part of it. So I've definitely enjoyed this discussion, Alpna, and thank you so much for including me in this.
Yeah, I also wanted to say thank you, and I wanted to leave just with one parting thought for the audience, is there is no one size fits all solution for a particular initiative that you have in mind. You really need to understand the end business goals, which are going to be different, and make sure that you're tailoring your solution to that business goal. You cannot walk in based on, oh, okay, this is what I heard in this panel, or this is what I heard, this is what I read from McKinsey. and then say, this is what I'm going to implement. It doesn't work that way. So my best suggestion is take a look at the business goals, align what needs to get done, and then deliver. So that's so one size does not fit all. Remember that.
One size is not fits all. No, fantastic remarks. And throughout the conversation, I myself enjoyed. You took me back years in this journey. I was so delighted to be on the opposite side, not exactly being in the hot seat, and really hearing your views. So it's been an engaging conversation. To our audience, I hope you all enjoyed it. This is an in-demand topic of data-powered digital transformation. We appreciate the perspectives that Suchita Nagale, that Jim Jose, and Umesh Toprani shared with us today. And I leave you with the remark, today is your opportunity to build the tomorrow you want. It's in your hands. So thank you all with that, and look forward to our next set of series of podcast sessions, which are Stralynn sponsored, coming up in the next couple of weeks. Stay tuned. Have a great day.